tonight's conversation is part of this Rising Tide project. The Arts Work Fund supported an 18-month project, helping Second Story kind of deepen our work around pay equity and arts worker care. And this project is continuing through support from the Angel Foundation. And there were three kind of big threads. The first one was an internal at Second Story, like doing some financial modeling and helping us do our planning. Part of it was external. So we did a bunch of these town halls that were around different questions. So we hosted 5 of them, I think, last year. Anything from thinking about like, what does it mean for an artist or an arts ecosystem to be built so that artists can thrive as opposed to survive, talking about creating systems of care for people who are caregivers, so parents or people who are caregiving for their elders, etc. And a number of other conversations. And then the third part was in partnership with other organizations. So we've been working with 3 organizations, Teatro, Vista, Red Orchid, and Congo Square, both as a way to kind of do a litmus test. So to say, here's some stuff that Second Story does or did, how does that map onto your work? Like, oh, that doesn't quite fit because your production model is different or your staffing model is different. Great, how do we judge our question over here to make it feel like the systems are more compatible? And then also to support those organizations in kind of forwarding their own work in arts worker care and pay equity. And we're just about to kick off our second cohort, which is very exciting. And a bunch of information is on our website if you want to read more about it. Kirsten and Wendy, we're going to talk about aha moments. And I know Second Story's biggest aha moment this year was semantic in nature. So we started this project with a focus on pay equity, which we defined as pay equity is compensating worker roles without discrimination. So the literal definition is balance, right? It's even, it's the same. But we realized that when we were talking about pay equity, we actually were talking about this thing that was a much larger umbrella, and we're confusing our terms a lot. And people, when we think about pay equity, we also think about paying people righteously or well, or taking care of them or paying them fairly. And our first town hall that I mentioned was about that. And we do have those kind of notes from the field from each of those town halls that you can find. So we realized that pay equity was unclear as an umbrella term, and we started to use the phrase arts worker care. And certainly pay equity is a component of that. It's a component of caring for arts workers, but so is, paying them a thriving wage and having benefit packages and thinking about how to care for independent contractors and freelancers and folks who are outside of the full-time staff structure, and arts workers with disabilities or parents, or how we build an arts ecosystem that kind of tends to the needs of everybody, or how work is structured, right? These kind of like 10 out of 12 days. And is that something that is really taking care of people? So that was one of our big aha moments, was that semantic change of moving from talking about pay equity as the umbrella to really kind of zooming out and talking about arts worker care as the umbrella. Wendy, I'd love for you to share a little bit about, like, what was the big, when you think about aha moments, what came up for you and your colleague Lorena at Teatro?
Yes. The big aha moment for us was that, and I think it might have been Lauren at the time that shared it. We were all having our one of our first group meetings and in person, and it was around the fact that although Teatro Vista itself is a 33-year-old institution, and for those who may not know, is 32-year-old Latina founded and led institution, it's still very much ran like a startup. Every year things were changing. There's an ever-changing landscape, especially landing on BIPOC founded and historically underfunded organization. And actually that phrase, when it was said to us, just was like, oh, it first of all released us a little bit from from always trying to find the process when it wasn't there, as far as this organization. And I heard as well from a lot of theaters that that's just sort of how it is. But we took over the role in 2021, and there were a lot of leadership changes at the time. Both leadership roles had transitioned out of the company as we transitioned in. And so we were just always on this constant search for where is the process for X, Y, and Z to produce a show, to say thank you to our donors. Like, where was everything? And where was the staff structure? Where was the support? And so all of those things were actually, we felt really empowered to say, hey, it's okay. We're going to be the ones to lay that foundation, lay that legacy of organization to this theater company. And so it just kind of gave us that aha moment, and being okay with flexibility, knowing that we had to be nimble, knowing that the titles that we had hired may have to change according to our learning curve. But we were able to realize in that moment that we were just surviving. And when we heard that phrase, we allowed ourselves to start a plan to thrive. And that is one of the biggest gifts that we received from the cohort, was really a space to just say that and say, I don't know what the plan is yet, but like, let's talk about it and let's find it together. And just really empowered us to lay down this legacy of organizational structure to this company.
I'm having a little bit of like a gut punch moment, right? That idea of like, how do we give ourselves permission to think beyond survival mode, right? And how even that tiny little, like, it seems like such a small step or a little door to open, but it seems like it kind of opened to this huge landscape of possibility and change for you.
It was such a big moment for us to even be a part of the cohort. We had taken on the role so quickly. We were in production and we were like, oh, I don't know if we could be a part of another cohort. Because, when foundations do things, it seems like it takes more from me than I'm getting from the cohort. And so we've received so much from this, that it was it's all wrapped up in that one that one phrase and that one release of guilt for whatever I did or hadn't done before.
Yeah, thank you. Kirsten, what came to mind for you as you were thinking about this aha moment?
The first thing that came to mind for me was this notion of a compensation philosophy. It's so funny because I have I have a bunch of stuff about releasing of guilt in a later question. So it's all going to tie right back beautifully, unexpectedly. But this notion, like, of course, we walk into this cohort and we all want to pay people better. We all want to take better care of people. We want to be better taken care of as artists. We know that, but the notion that that we can actually think about and identify, like, how we want to feel about what we're able to offer, or how we define the goals as a philosophy, as something that is held deep in our hearts, and like a value, a core value that we have. And this question of, for me, one of the things that I think sort of landed it pretty clearly was this, because I do work other places besides a Red Orchid, is this question about what am I willing to say yes to and where, because what I'm willing to say yes to is very different depending on where I'm walking in the door. But should it be? And certainly it has to be in many instances, but I want people to be able to say yes. And that was some of the biggest, and what sort of some of that narrows down to for me, or focuses in on.
And that was that we want people to be able to say yes was where you all kind of landed with that compensation philosophy draft.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so a little bit of context there. So one of the activities that we did over the year was kind of to think about what does it mean to craft a compensation philosophy. And some of that was based in the work that Lauren and I have done with the board at Second Story. So we feel like we started with something to the effect of we want people to be proud of the number that they say. And
yeah.
so that was, Lauren, do you want to tell the story about the board member and their wife seeing the budget? And
Sure. Yeah, so we had a board member reviewing our, next year's budget at his kitchen table, and his wife walked by and asked whose salary that was, because she assumed the total amount had to reflect one person, and that board member had to respond all of them. And that was a very humbling experience for him, and he was not proud of that number, even if it was just for one person, let alone for all of the people. And that really drove him to bring up a conversation at the board level that was, when somebody asks us what our artistic director and managing director make, are we proud of the number we currently have? What is a number, what is a salary that we can be proud of?
yeah, and so that was when we started thinking about that was probably, I don't know, 5 years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like with the pandemic in there, maybe longer. Was it 7 years ago? I don't know. It was a while. It was a while. Time is weird. But that was kind of for our first draft of a compensation philosophy. So this idea of a value or a mantra that we can get a group of people to hook onto in terms of why this work is so important. Like, yes, 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 of course, we all want to be proud of the number that we say when we say, this is what we pay our storytellers, this is what we pay our staff, etc. And it's more for us over time. The one that we are working with right now is we take care of our people. But again, it's that kind of, Kirsten, I think you used the word value, right? Like it's this mantra or a value or something that a large group of people can all hook onto. And it has been really, really useful.
With our ensemble theaters, there's a bunch of different stakeholders, that are going to have, very different opinions depending on the day and which ones you have in the room, in terms of whether it's board or ensemble or staff. But being able to have them all come together, to get behind something like that, and it doesn't always mean paying people more. For us, some, wanting people to be able to say yes meant, okay, well, we can't increase this part of the salary this year, but what we can do is make sure people know that we're not asking, even though we're operating at a certain equity tier, we're not going to use all those hours, because it would be unreasonable for us to ask you to give us 30 hours when really all we can pay you for is 22, that kind of thing. So shifting how we're modeling, even producing, or going to a 5-day rehearsal week instead of a 6-day rehearsal week, that kind of thing.
One thing that came up a lot was how useful it was to be in time and space together. And I'm hoping that one of you would speak to that. Like, what did being a member of a group or community who was kind of all grappling with this question at the same time accomplish, or what did it mean to do this kind of work and thinking in community?
It's indispensable, quite honestly. I don't like, and different people operate different ways, but I don't work very well as a solo artist or administrator. I work best in collaboration and in conversation, and so I can get real stuck real fast.
I guess
And
that makes
I
sense
think,
as an actor, right? Like
yeah,
you literally can't do your work without other people. Like it is
yeah,
not possible.
yeah, yeah. So those ideas and how to articulate them come in that conversation and community, and recognizing that, oh, we even sometimes you recognize, oh wait, we are doing this thing in over here, but there's no reason we can't, like you guys are doing, do it over here. You know, you have huge discoveries in hearing how other people are applying the language, the thoughts, the practices, the ideas. Yeah.
I'll say the same. I mean, first of all, the intentional space that was created by the folks at Second Story was so, it was a brave space. I won't even say it was a safe space. It was just a really brave space. We all sort of came. I remember that one, I think it was our first like in-person cohort, and it was like January 6th, it's like so
It
cold
was
and
so snowy. Yeah.
snowy, and we're kind of slogging through our season in that time of after the holidays, and it was so valuable. I remember I'm like, I don't want to go, it's cold, it's 10 a.m. And then we were like, we got emotional. So it was just, you had those days where you felt seen by your true peers. It also felt just so intentional, the cohort of folks that you all brought together. For us at the time, we were all grappling with a lot of the same challenges, and many different ones too, but ones that could come up for us at any point in time. Same kind of operating budgets and ensembles and professional theater companies still, but smaller professional theater companies. It was really, really important to have and to draw upon that wisdom in the room as well. They say really draw upon that wisdom, and we were at times voices for each other as well. Hi, one of my accessibility needs is here. Okay, she's hello. This is my daughter Tallulah. She's going to be a circus performer. Okay, so but I will say that we were that voice for each other. At times, someone would be grappling with something. We could all be the voice of the actor or the directors or those independent artists that are coming into the room. And then at times we were the voice of the administrator or the board and being like, nah, I don't think that's going to go. I don't think that's going to work. Or maybe we can reframe it here and there. So just again, like Kirsten said, having that ability to just talk it through out loud together, and understand also that we weren't alone. We weren't alone on that cold, snowy day in January, and then the resource sharing was incredible. The resource sharing from the frameworks that were shared, the exercises that were shared in the room, some we were able to take back to our teams. And talk about how we got there, and to fundraising ideas, and there was so much resource sharing going on, which is something that I've always, as an independent artist, really saw the lack of. I'm like, why? I'm the same artist working at every theater, and yet y'all can't seem to talk to each other, which is why I felt this program felt like I was changing something, that we were part of something, that these 4 art organizations were doing this work in this city and affects artists that cross all of our stages. That felt important to me because it felt like we're impacting a community and not just our organizations, that we're putting this into our Chicago theater zeitgeist and saying, this is what we stand for. And I've seen a lot of artists not stand for it anymore, even with the big theaters. Like, yeah, I mean, that pay seems okay, but as an understudy, I got to be there every night. I don't know. They're like, maybe I won't, and so I got so much from being in the cohort. I mean, there were times where we had some human resource challenges in our last production. And I remember coming to the table and sort of expressing, like, how do I balance this and manage this? And didn't have anything to do with pay equity at the time, but really was able to draw upon some of that wisdom. And it really gave us a way to approach that work with our artists and with our teams.
I want to just add one thing, and that I don't often have, but accountability. In that, if there weren't other organizations making the time and space to meet on a regular basis and discuss or bring those resources to the table, bring those ideas to the table, I think it would be continuing to take us way longer to articulate all of this. I think it just, or it might never get done, you know?
And to
So,
implement too, like the
yeah,
accountability to implement it. There's so
yes,
much
yes.
work that I do that lives on my Google Drive.
Oh,
But this felt like this felt like,
yeah,
oh, we were talking about it and implementing it directly
there's
into our production
active
of the
things
program.
happening.
It's an overview of the year. There's obviously is a table of contents. I think the most exciting thing in here is some of the resources. So the resources are some of the activities that we did as an organization. But if you go through this in order, you'll see that there's just like an overview introduction of like, hey, here's what we did. Here are some of the questions that we were asking. There's a timeline, so what we did in what order. There's a kind of overview of what Second Story was doing internally, and there's a bunch of links on this page. So you'll see that like we have a pay equity policy is on our website. You can see it here. We have financial documents. If you're a lurker like Lauren Sivak is and goes and looks at other people's financial documents, they're real easy for you to find. Our values page, etc. And then it goes through the cohort and what the cohort did, and the materials that we created for the cohort. And then the town halls. So I mentioned we did all of those town halls. There's a summary of the different conversations that we had for each of them. So there's like a page for each of those conversations, including all of the links to the things that we were referencing. And then acknowledgements, yay people, the resources. So in the resources is a list of definitions. This is also on our website. One of the first activities that we did was everybody's favorite activity of a SWOT analysis, which is thinking about the kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the organization. So a couple of them being really internal and a couple of them being external, and like how are we thinking about where we are in terms of the risks that we are currently thinking about and the opportunities and strengths that we have. So we started here. You use a page where you can make your own notes. And then the second big one that we did was look at this common threads. So the common threads were the Second Story staff going and from the conversations that we had with all of the cohort members, pulling out what we saw as the common thread. So these kind of 9 pillars of things that feel like they're woven across this conversation around pay equity and arts worker care. So this goes through those 9 different threads and the kinds of questions and things that live underneath each of those buckets. And one of the activities, I think, Kirsten, are you going to talk about that ranking activity? Okay, so I won't talk about it. And then we talked about this pay triangle. So this was us trying to put some language to the fact that, like, when we think about pay, it's not just about paying people better, right? That there are all sorts of ways that we can take better care of people that fall into the area of pay. So the 3 areas that we identified were equity, transparency, and practice. So equity being like, are we paying people equally, et cetera. Transparency being like, are we communicating clearly about all of the things? So whether that's putting offers into emails, making like when we're posting jobs, saying, hey, here is the salary. We have our financials on our website, that kind of stuff. And then practice being the actual like systems and practices that we have in place to pay people. And so that's thinking about like, how timely are we? Are we like in the very first town hall, one of the things that one of the freelancers said was like, don't make me chase you, right? And I would imagine that everybody on this call has had to chase after their paycheck at some point. And that's labor that we just shouldn't have to do. So this pay triangle is another one of these kinds of like, what is the state of the union sort of activity? And then we had all of the cohort members draft an arts worker care plan. So this was the worksheet that we provided that has, here are some guiding questions. And then here is the template of that arts worker care plan. So, and that includes the compensation philosophy that we mentioned earlier and other things. And then there's a bunch of articles and resources. We also have a bunch of articles and resources on our website. What's the most exciting to you about setting your sights on this goal of arts worker care? Like, what has it unlocked for you? What do you think it can accomplish? Like, what sets you on fire about it as opposed to making you panic?
It is incredibly exciting to be able, like I said, to implement something we've created that continues to evolve. It's almost like this living document, this art worker care plan. What it has done logistically has sharpened our focus. We know how to talk to the board about what we need, and what we are doing to get those needs accomplished. And that's been really, really useful, because there are times when the board is like, well, they're just a bunch of artists and they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm like, no, we do. And much like Lauren shared earlier, when I was like, this salary is just not going to work. And here are the competitive salaries. And yes, no, we're not going to just jump there, but here is a way to do it. And we need y'all's help to do that. So that was really exciting. But more so, it's just exciting as a producer and as a director to start figuring out, how do I bring that into the room every day? For example, we just did a very physical show. It was a silent show. And being able to care for those artists again in more ways than the weekly wage, which, still we're still working on it, but it's not there. It's not where we'd like it to be. But how did we care for them and their bodies and their time? How did we care for the folks who were parents in the cast? How did we find ways to accommodate and meet them where they're at, which is our compensation policy, in order to meet our artists where they're at. So it's really exciting to be able to see new opportunities to implement that. And I'm considering a cast right now for our fall show, and there's a transgender an actor, and I was like, oh, how will I accommodate that? How will I meet them where they're at? What do they need? What don't I have here that can accommodate, or just show care in a way for another artist that we haven't had at the table before. So those are the ways in which it excites us every day as producers and directors to figure out how we're going to meet our artists where they're at.
Awesome. I'm gonna add to that for me personally, there was this relieving of myself of this sense of guilt that I always had when it comes time to make offers, and knowing that I'm not didn't have what I felt super proud of to offer, but to embrace this process of learning and transparency as well, and to include the artists in that, and the staff and the people that were making the offers too. So I think about this one very specific conversation I had with a designer that I was making an offer for, and this was just early in our starting of this process, and they came back and asked for more, just said, I really need to get to this number if there's any way. And there was no way we were going to get all the way to that number, but I had to, and also we commit to paying all of our designers the same fee in any given season. So being able to then say to that designer, I can't get to that number, but give me a week to work with my production manager to see if I can get a little closer, because one of the things I also have to do is consider how I get everybody a little closer. And the knowledge for that person that we were paying all of the designers the same fee, no matter what, was enough for them to say yes. The knowledge of them being included in that conversation was enough, and we were able to raise them a little bit and get all of them up a little bit, but they were super appreciative of that and being included in that conversation. Um, the so there's something about the educating and the giving everybody agency to say yes or no, here's, and let them know here are the ways that we are working to care for you, even if we can't get the money number all the way there yet. Also educating them about the steps that you have taken. That I had an interaction with an actor's manager about a year ago, saying that here's where we were a year ago, here's where we are now, here's where we want to go. And just knowing that we were in that process was really, and even like managers and agents don't get lit in on that often, and neither do the actors. They just hear a number. So understanding that there was work being done and progress being made. And it does make me think about and go back to that early exercise that you were talking about, Amanda, the common threads. And one of the things that you asked us to do is in groups. It wasn't even I guess it was a ranking of where we needed to start first, like what we felt needed to be tackled first or most assertively, and how we ranked them. And it was a little different for everybody, which was really cool. But there were a few things that like connected all of them for us. And, for us, like the ensemble was present in all of those things somehow, but getting all of those people on the same page requires some transparency and some willingness to have the conversation with all of those people. And it's time consuming and sometimes sort of exhausting. And I know you all have heard me say sometimes feels like you're sort of defending your life all the time. But I have gratefully been able to veer away from that a little bit, or it doesn't feel like that so much because we have had the conversations with all those people and will continue to do so. It feels more like reminding them or asking for their opinion or buy-in now than it does defending, which is really exciting.
Yeah. If I remember right, I think we did that common threads activity 2 ways. First, we did it in like blended groups, meaning that people were together and they weren't necessarily with their theaters. And we did a little bit like, hey, how would we map these? Like, how are these 9 things related to each other? And then somebody built like a construction paper bridge kind of thing, if I remember right. It was like 3D. And then the second round was in your theater then, like, how would you rank these? Yeah, totally. And those conversations are hard and important for sure.